and welcome to Diabetes Connections in the News. I'm Stacey Sims, and these are the top diabetes stories and headlines happening now. In the News is brought to you by the T1D Exchange, dedicated to improving outcomes for the entire T1D population. Our top story, today's the day, February 17th, Dexcom's G7 becomes available in the United States. Now, whether you can get it still depends on your insurance, your doctor, a new prescription is needed, and the availability at your pharmacy. Whether you want to get it may depend on if you use a compatible pump system. The G7 will not work yet with Tandem's Control-IQ or Omnipod 5. Timeline is at least a few more months at minimum for that. The G7 will be accessible to all Medicare patients with diabetes who meet the eligibility criteria as of today, so no wait there. Much more to come on this launch, I'm sure. More evidence that COVID-19 infections are tied to a new diagnosis of diabetes. Still not clear whether the relationship is a coincidence or actual cause and effect, but a very big study here. 23,000 adults who'd had COVID-19 at least once. The raw data showed that people who'd had COVID-19 had higher risks of being diagnosed with diabetes, high cholesterol, and high blood pressure after their infections. But when researchers adjusted those numbers, only the risk of diabetes remained significantly elevated, 58% more likely after COVID. These researchers say this new study is notable because it adds recent data, which means the Omicron variant is included. This went from March 2020 to June 2022, and it also used strategies to try to address shifts in healthcare during the pandemic. Insulet making a couple of interesting acquisitions, $25 million in assets from automated glucose control, and at the same time, $25 million of assets from Bigfoot Biomedical. Now, AGC and Insulet have had a partnership since 2016, which mostly involved the algorithm that led to Omnipod 5. Bigfoot has a bunch of patents regarding more hands-off insulin delivery. The company says these acquisitions double Insulet's IP, intellectual property, portfolio. Preliminary research here, but doctors in Colorado say cannabis side effects can mimic DKA in people with type 1. These researchers started noticing patterns among people with type 1 in emergency rooms after cannabis was legalized in Colorado, and they found that DKA was frequently misdiagnosed. They're calling it HKCHS, which stands for hyperglycemic ketosis cannabis hyperemesis syndrome. The key differences for the care team are to test the pH and bicarbonate levels in your blood. The treatment is typically increasing fluids, treating high blood glucose with insulin, and balancing electrolytes. And these researchers say it's best to be honest and upfront with your care team if you're using cannabis or any kind of cannabis products here. About 2/3 of people with type 1 in the U.S. are overweight or obese, nearly the same proportions as Americans without diabetes. This research also suggests that people with type 1 are less likely to receive lifestyle recommendations from healthcare professionals than those with type 2. They are also less likely to actually engage in what this study calls lifestyle weight management activities. These researchers say there's not a lot of evidence for safe and effective methods of diet and exercise-based weight control in people with type 1, and that may be keeping doctors from recommending any kind of methods. Large clinical trials have been done in people with type 2 to establish these guidelines, and they're pushing for something similar for people with type 1. New research is showing men and women have different risk factors when it comes to type 2. In healthy women, low serum level of a specific protein was an independent, strong predictor of type 2 or prediabetes. In healthy men, a low serum level of a liver protein was a strong predictor. There is a lot of detail, as you can imagine, in this study in terms of which proteins in which tissue. I will link it all up. All of these studies are linked up in the show notes. A previous study in Shanghai in 2016 showed some similar differences in men and women, but it also showed in men with prediabetes, the risk of future type 2 was reduced if they exercised more and increased muscle mass. That study showed women with prediabetes who decreased their waist circumference did a lot to prevent type 2. Back to the news in just a moment, but first, our sponsor for In the News is the T1D Exchange. You've heard me talk about this before, and I want to tell you about the registry and really urge you to sign up. I know a lot of you have done this already, and I so appreciate that, but if you haven't, you really can make a difference. The T1D Exchange registry connects academic and industry researchers to participants. You get curated T1D research opportunities. they're making it as easy as they can, trying to reduce barriers so they can get more and more people with type 1 into research studies. You hear me talk in these newscasts about all of these studies, and they need people like you to take part. Your personal information remains confidential. You don't have to participate in every study. You just do whatever you want to do. Find out more. Go to T1DExchange.org/Stacey. That's T1DExchange.org/STACEY. If you've got a high school senior living with type 1, you can apply to get money for college. The 2023 Diabetes Scholars applications are now open. I am linking these up in the show notes. There's a lot more information here, but basically the applicant has to have been diagnosed with type 1, enrolled in high school as a graduating senior, or homeschooled as a senior rising to freshman in college, U.S. citizen or permanent resident, and planning to attend a four-year university, a community college, or a technical school this fall or in the spring of 2024. On the podcast next week, looking at the problem of infusion set failure. Many of us have long said that the weak link of insulin pumps is how they connect to the body, and what can be done about infusion set failure. Well, this new company, Diatech Diabetes, is sharing what they would like to do about it. We'll talk about that next week. And this last long format episode is with Dr. Felicity Rose, all about explaining to your child when you, the parent, have diabetes. You can find that wherever you found this episode. That's in the news for this week. If you like it, please share it. I'm Stacey Sims. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you back here soon.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Sims Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.